Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to dig into a really fascinating framework for spiritual grounding. We're going to unpack exactly how psychological distress literally rewires our internal systems, but more importantly, we're going to look at how we can build a wholesome, highly structured anchor to actually navigate through it. It's going to be a great deep dive, so let's get right into it. So let's kick things off with a pretty big question, one that really challenges the oversimplified way we usually talk about mental struggle. Are anxiety and depression just feelings? Because, it's so incredibly easy to brush them off as just bad moods or temporary emotional dips. But honestly, treating them as simple, passing feelings fundamentally misses the reality of what is actually happening inside a person's body and mind. It's tempting to just dismiss these states as being worried or sad, kind of like a passing rain cloud, right? But this systemic reality is so vastly different. We're not just talking about a fleeting emotion you can snap out of. We are talking about entire internal weather systems. And these systems, they fundamentally alter a person's attention, their energy, and literally how they interpret reality itself. They are pervasive states that entirely reshape how someone experiences the world around them. Let's look at anxiety for a second. Anxiety isn't just fear. Fear has a very clear object, right? Like you see a speeding car heading toward you, you feel fear. But anxiety? It's more like a completely oversensitive smoke alarm. A smoke alarm is absolutely crucial to protect you, sure. But when it starts blaring at top volume just because you burned a piece of toast, that becomes completely exhausting. It's this hyperactive threat detection system firing off wild warning signals before your conscious mind even has a clue why. And then on the flip side, we have depression, which, again, isn't just sadness. It really operates more like a system running on an underpowered battery. Think of a smartphone that just never seems to fully charge, no matter how long you leave it plugged into the wall. Even the smallest everyday tasks feel incredibly heavy. Your emotions feel totally muted, your motivation drops to zero, and the world just kind of loses its color. And it's so important to realize that this is not a lack of willpower. It's a massive systemic drop in power. Now, here's where things get really interesting and honestly pretty messy. Because your whole internal wiring is strained, these states aren't always opposites. They actually overlap all the time. Imagine a house with completely faulty wiring. You can simultaneously feel the exhausting, buzzing acceleration of anxiety right alongside the numb, heavy deceleration of depression. The lights flicker, the system hums strangely, and their body is just flooded with completely mixed signals. When you map out how these overlapping systems actually function, a super clear pattern pops up. With anxiety, that hyperactive threat system makes you feel like something is perpetually wrong. With depression, the low energy makes absolutely everything feel heavy. And when both hit at the exact same time, you're left feeling completely numb and completely overwhelmed simultaneously. Seeing it laid out like this really proves that these states are predictable, structured patterns. They are absolutely not random personal failures. So what do we actually do about this? Well, the crucial goal here is finding what's known as inner ground. And let me be clear, this isn't about magically erasing your fear. And it is definitely not about just thinking positive. We all know how useless that advice can be. It actually means creating a stable reference point to hold the pain. It's about finding something far, far steadier than panic or hopelessness to stand on while that internal weather system is raging. I absolutely love thinking about this like an anchor line. As the saying goes, the waves may still move, but the person is no longer being thrown everywhere. Spiritual grounding doesn't empty the ocean of its water, and it doesn't magically stop the storm from happening. But what it does do is give you the stability to actually survive it. It holds you remarkably steady when those massive waves of anxiety or depression just keep crashing down. There is a profound difference between just getting reassurance and finding true grounding. Hollow reassurance tries to dismiss the alarm entirely. It's someone patting your back saying, hey, you'll be fine, which, let's be real, rarely helps an overactive nervous system. True spiritual grounding does something different. It sits right there with you in the fear. It tells you, even here in this fear, you are absolutely not abandoned. It provides a deep, genuine sense of belonging and presence, rather than just brushing your pain aside. Okay, so how does spiritual grounding actually pull this off? Well, it systematically rebuilds our inner steadiness across 3 progressive layers. We're talking about our attention, our relationship to our own thoughts, and ultimately our core identity. Let's walk through these one by one because it's a pretty brilliant progression. First up, let's talk about attention. Anxiety completely traps the mind in this relentless loop of scanning the horizon for danger. But intentional practices,
Things like prayer, meditation, or even just periods of structured silence, they actually reorder that attention. By introducing repeated, predictable rituals, they give your exhausted brain a much-needed steady rhythm to return to. So you still notice the fear, for sure, but you stop letting it become your entire world.
Moving on to the second layer, and this one is a real game changer. Grounding fundamentally changes our relationship to our thoughts. Suddenly, thoughts become passing events rather than final truths or absolute verdicts on your life. It creates this life-saving pause where you can finally recognize that an internal alarm might be screaming loud, but it isn't necessarily accurate. You learn to step back and say, okay, I feel afraid, but fear is just a state I'm in right now. It's not a verdict. And then we hit the third layer, which is arguably the most important. It actively protects our core identity. When we're in deep distress, it is so easy to absorb painful labels, right? Things like, I am weak, or I am totally broken. But spiritual practice refuses to let a temporary condition or a moment of collapse define who you permanently are. Instead, it asks you an incredibly profound question. Who am I beneath this feeling? Because the truth is, you are vastly more than your exhaustion. When you actually put all these pieces together, the transformation is kind of mind-blowing. Your attention shifts away from constant threat and moves towards steadiness. The meaning you assign to things shifts from total catastrophe to bearable reframing. And that terrible isolation, it turns into deep, meaningful connection. Seeing this whole journey really clarifies why spiritual healing feels like being fundamentally reassembled from the inside out, rather than just getting a fleeting moment of comfort. Now, I really want to be clear about something absolutely crucial here. We are not using spirituality to just avoid reality. Avoidance shrinks your life down to escape hard feelings. True grounding, however, does the exact opposite. It actually enlarges your capacity to remain beautifully human while carrying some really heavy questions. It empowers you to stay present and face the pain, but this time with genuine support holding you up. Ultimately, there's this fantastic idea that spiritual healing simply gives distress a place to land. It's not about forcing some fake, immediate joy, and it's definitely not about pretending the darkness doesn't exist. It's about giving your suffering a safe, bounded space to exist. It reminds you deep down that the heaviness is not forever, and that the suffering does not get the final word. As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with something to really chew on. How will you use this framework of inner ground to navigate and anchor your own internal weather? My hope is that you can take this compassionate, highly structured understanding and actually apply it to your own life and your relationships, allowing yourself and those around you a truly safe place to land. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep learning.